Hi. In 2005, I had the honor of being asked to produce a video commemorating the very first multi-day bluegrass festival ever held. And it was held here in Fincastle, Virginia in 1965. The man who promoted the concert was named Carlton Haney. So the whole event was a 40-year anniversary, but in a special way it was there to honor him. So I produced this video, used a lot of interviews from folks who were at the original festival in 1965. The video begins with a brief history of bluegrass music, starting with Bill Monroe and the Bluegrass Boys, and how the sound evolved. So I hope you'll enjoy the video.
Before Flatt and Scruggs, before Don Reno and Red Smiley, before any other bluegrass artist, there was Bill Monroe. William Smith Monroe recorded the very first bluegrass song, Mule Skinner Blues, in 1940. But it all started before that, when Bill on the mandolin and his brother Charlie on the guitar performed as the Monroe Brothers in the 1920s and 30s. Bill and Charlie split in 1938, and Bill formed his own band. Because Bill was from Kentucky, he decided to name his band Bill Monroe and the Bluegrass Boys. They made their first appearance on the Grand Ole Opry in 1939. The band relied on hard driving and powerful sounds with traditional acoustic instruments and distinctive vocal harmonies. After experimenting with different combinations of instruments, Bill settled on mandolin, banjo, fiddle, guitar, and bass as the format of his band. That's a pattern that has been followed by bluegrass artists ever since. After 21-year-old Earl Scruggs joined the band in 1945, the classic sound of bluegrass really came together. Earl played an innovative three-finger picking style on the banjo that energized enthusiastic audiences. The classic mid-40s lineup of the band included Monroe on mandolin, Scruggs on banjo, his future partner Lester Flatt on guitar and lead vocals, Chubby Wise on fiddle, and Howard Watts on acoustic bass. Many musicians moved in and out of the Bluegrass Boys over the years, but the basic sound of the group was unchanged. The band toured widely and played thousands of shows around the world before they ventured to a horse farm near Fincastle, Virginia, and made history as part of the very first multi-day, multi-band bluegrass festival in the world.
In the pine where the sun don't ever shine, and you shiver when the cold wind blows.
I was a bluegrass nut from about the age of 6, and every summer I would come down to visit my relatives in Lexington, and I would listen to the country music radio stations from Roanoke. And I'll never forget the day that I heard the commercial with a banjo playing in the background saying there was going to be a bluegrass festival at Cantrell's Horse Farm in Fincastle. Being too young to drive, I managed to find somebody from Lexington to bring me down, a banjo player named Freddie Goodhart. And Freddie and I came down to the festival and remember the dusty road that everybody remembers, and the tiny little crowd, the grove of trees around the stage. But it was like heaven to me. It was the first time that I'd seen a lot of these musicians in person.
The students that came in from different places like California, they was hitchhiking in. And they'd have the instruments on the back. They didn't have no place to stay. And here we were there, and so a lot of them slept in my hay barn, where I kept my horses down there in a different barn from where we had the barn dances. And they just had a ball, and they was up all night long, and I don't think anybody ever slept. They was all keyed up.
Once we arrived, I was immediately struck by the massive number of people that were present. I also remember that it was hot, very dusty, and I remember lots of music being played all around in different groups, in different venues around the festival site. And because we were all in bluegrass music, we set up our equipment and our instruments and started playing a little bit as well. No, we were not particularly good, but we had a great time.
We decided we'd go to Nashville for a week and a half just to find some good bluegrass music. And we were down there for a week, and we were very disappointed. We couldn't find any bluegrass music. The people who we thought would be down there were, I guess, out on the road. We went into Ernest Tubbs' record shop. They're on Broadway. And we saw the poster. Said, hey, man, that says bluegrass music, Labor Day weekend. Of course, most everybody in bluegrass now is familiar with that original poster. And said, Cantrell's Horse Farm, Fincastle, Virginia. And Fincastle, and I believe the sign might have mentioned Roanoke on it too. And we got to go right by there to go home, not another day or two. That's where we need to be.
I guess one of the things I remember most was this was the first time I saw Bill Monroe live, and I was just so impressed with his stature.
You know, the way he presented himself, the way he stood, the way he dressed, the way he was really take charge, and a real gentleman, but very focused, you know, and very few words, of course, because that's Bill's way, but totally commanding.
I'm traveling down this lonesome road, oh, how I hate to go. The wind is storm raging high, and it's awful cold. My mind drifts back to you, sweetheart, and I love you so. But now you're gone and left me here to travel this lonesome road. I'm traveling down this lonesome road, oh, how I hate to go. The wind and storm are raging high, and it's awful cold. My mind drifts back to you, sweetheart, and I love you so. But now you've gone and left me here to travel this lonesome road.
They said Bill Monroe's in a bus, so a green bus. And so everybody was looking for the green bus. So finally, about almost an hour or something, well, here comes the green bus. Well, it done broke down 3 times. They had to have it pushed in or pulled in, I forgot, into my farm. And I said, great. I don't know, it was an early model bus. It looked like an old-timey school bus. And it was really run down. And I said, Bill, I told Bill, I said, I tell you, I hope one day you'll make enough money to buy you a good bus to go to the shows. And he laughed and laughed and laughed.
At the 1965 Bluegrass story, Jimmy Martin and and Carlton Haney were on stage at the same time, and Bill grabbed the mic and said, "Both of you boys were trying to go with my daughter," which is true. Carlton Haney had a crush on Bill Monroe's daughter, Melissa, at the time. And Carlton has told me he didn't even like bluegrass music until he and Melissa were listening to it in a car one day, and Melissa was able to talk him into understanding the fine points of bluegrass.
Carlton's a great storyteller. That's what I remember about Carlton, especially during the Sunday afternoon bluegrass story, he called it, the story. And I'm sure he's a great joke teller too, because he really knows how to save the punchline till the end. I talked to him on the phone a couple weeks ago, and he would tell a story, and you could see him kind of like lead you down the path, and you just take that last turn, and there's the payoff, and that's Carlton's way.
Carlton Haney's foresight and vision in even imagining that a bluegrass festival could be a successful event was just tremendous, and probably at that time kept the music alive almost by giving the artists places to play.
The 1965 Fincastle Bluegrass Festival really started the whole new era for bluegrass music. And we know today that as a result of that one event, over 500 such bluegrass festivals are held in the country every year. That to me is the greatest legacy of all of what Carlton Haney and his team did in 1965.
In 1965, when Carlton did the festival at Fincastle, there wasn't a clear plan for continuing it or replicating it. But although it clearly wasn't a financial or audience success the first year, everyone who was there thought it was a tremendous artistic success. And the acts realized that this might well be the turning point for bluegrass music, so they encouraged Carlton to continue the festival. If I'm not mistaken, 1966, the Fincastle Festival was also the only multi-day bluegrass festival in the world. But the next year, 1967, several other festivals began to take place. There was one in Ohio, and there were festivals in Northern Virginia. Bill Monroe shortly thereafter started his summer festival at Bean Blossom, Indiana, and the phenomenon began to grow. They were entirely patterned on this first festival here in Fincastle, Virginia.
Jimmy Martin, a great singer, of course, and real strong guitar player. And he had the way he would sing his inflections. He'd sing the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, and he'd go up on the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, and it was just real captivating.
Shenandoah Valley of Virginia lives a girl, and I know her love is true. In the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia lives a girl who is waiting just for me. Many times we have walked in the moonlight, and in her loving arms I long to be. I miss her sweet smiles in the moonlight, and I know she misses me too. In the shadow valley of old Virginia lives a girl, and I know her love is true.
On the farm there, they had different groups around. And so they sit around, and these people that played, these young students and all, that was going to school around, they buy records and all, and they knew how the tone was, but they didn't know how to put the fingers on the string to get the chords like it is. So they sit there just like they was in church. I mean, they was viewing everything. And Don Reno was, like I say, was teaching the banjo, and Red Smiley the guitar, Mac McAhee, or what, I believe that's what his name is, was doing the fiddle. He was a great entertainer. And John Palmer, he was really great. I mean, he'd give you straight off his back, but he was a bass player. And I believe Melvin Brown was doing the mandolin.
I guess that I was one of the first parking lot pickers in bluegrass history, and that's one of the things people love to do at bluegrass festivals, is to take their instruments out into the fields during the concerts or after the concerts and jam with people that had been complete strangers. Well, Freddie Goodhart and I took his banjo and my guitar, and we sat around the car and were playing after the Friday night concert. And a big fellow in a crew cut and bib overalls came by and was obviously tanked, drew out a .45 revolver and said, "I want you boys to play Foggy Mountain Breakdown or I'm going to blow your fool heads off." I was 15 years old. I never told that story to my parents. But that was my introduction to parking lot picking, and that was a fairly unforgettable experience. We must have played it to his satisfaction, because he afterwards offered us a beer, which I also didn't tell my parents about.
Did you take it?
Of course. I was shaking at that point.
One of the things that really touched me was we left the site to go for breakfast one morning. We stopped and had some breakfast, and the waitress could tell that we were not from around here, and she, you folks visiting or whatever, no, we're here for the Bluegrass Festival, and they were so flattered that we would take enough of an interest in that music to come all the way down here to hear it. And we were so impressed also with how easily we were accepted. You know, 65 was a rough summer in this country, and coming from northern part of the United States, we didn't really quite know what to expect. And everyone was here for the music. All the other issues just disappeared.
Carlton Haney, you certainly did change my life when you put on that first Bluegrass Festival at Cantrell's Horse Farm. As Bill Monroe was saying to the musicians on that stage that afternoon, I worked them hard, but they've become better men for it. And I would certainly like to think that I've become a better man in my adulthood because of the many, many years I spent with you putting on bluegrass festivals all over the country.
As a result of that first festival in 1965, many great things have happened, and bluegrass music has exploded, largely due to you and to your efforts then and continuing for the next many years. We thank you for your continued efforts to promote bluegrass music, for the many memories that you've shared with us about those early days, and for just bringing a whole nother dimension to American music in the genre of bluegrass music. Thank you, Carlton.
And I appreciate all those things you did for me down there at Carlton, I'm looking forward, if it's possible, to see you at the show. And I hope I can get back together, because we was pretty well partners and everything, and we worked together, and I'm real proud to be part of the Bluegrass that you promoted, and I appreciate everything you did for me. Thank you, Carlton.
Carlton, we want to thank you so much for starting this first Fincastle Bluegrass Festival, keeping it going through the years, all the different festivals that you've had something to do with, and knowing that down the road from the original one, it could end up like it has, where there's thousands of festivals going on today all over the world. So thank you again, Carlton.
Carlton, you did a wonderful thing 40 years ago, and that one festival, the first Fincastle, really changed my life. And a lot of my friends too. Some are going to be here and some couldn't make it, but we're all grateful. And not just grateful to you for what you did for us, but for what you did for Bill Monroe's place in the history of bluegrass. It's really made a big difference for all of us. So thank you, Carlton.
The impression that stays with everyone, I think, is the Sunday afternoon bluegrass story, as Carlton Haney described it, in which Carlton recreated the history of Bill Monroe's music with the musicians that had originally made it. What's surprising today is how close in time 1965 was to those original recordings and original performances. Bill Monroe's classic bluegrass band came together in 1945. That had only been 20 years earlier. And tunes they were doing as kind of ancient history that afternoon were only 10 or 12 years old in 1965. Today, of course, more than a half a century has gone by since those recordings. Most of the original musicians who played with Bill Monroe and the Bluegrass Boys were still alive, and a large number of them were there that Sunday afternoon. Carlton brought them out in order, starting with Clyde Moody playing the guitar. He had been on Bill Monroe's very first Bluebird sides with the Bluegrass Boys in 1940. So that was amazing to have Clyde Moody and Bill Monroe singing together on stage. And then after that, he was able to bring on Jim Eanes, Mac Wiseman, Don Reno, Benny Martin, Jimmy Martin, Larry Richardson, musicians that had down through the years both performed and recorded with Bill Monroe. It was Carlton Haney's narration, though, that made that experience hang together. It gave it a story, literally. It also charged Bill Monroe up tremendously, this notion that he would be the fellow that could work all day and stay on stage and take on any musician that came. It was like, what do they call those tough man contests? And Bill Monroe was the classic tough man on stage. And as I listened to the tape of that afternoon, he was putting songs in the highest keys he could think of, trying to make the musicians sing at the top of their range. And he took a lot of pleasure in singing tenor to all of them.
If everybody get quiet, everybody be still, we're going to do the song that started bluegrass music, and the man that started it's going to play it and sing it just as he did 30 years ago. Everybody just remain quiet, and we're going to do it. Just please, everybody stop wherever they are, and we're going to do, this is the beginning of the life story of Bill Monroe here now. This is a song that he recorded in Atlanta, Georgia in 1939, the Mule Skinner Blues.